How's it going, folks? Tactard Ted. It is Saturday, 18 June 2022. How are you guys doing today? So what is on my mind? What is on my mind? Well, of course, it's the topic that seems to occupy my mind most of the time anymore. It would be the war in Ukraine. Yes, the war in Ukraine. So, as you know, the Ukrainians are winning, the Russians are losing. Absolutely 100%. In fact, the Russians haven't lost this badly since they took Berlin in 1945. I mean, it's ridiculous, folks. They are making such a crap show out of the media, out of what our government's telling us. I don't understand how they're not ashamed. This is how bad it is, folks. You can go into YouTube and search these words: Ukraine may be losing. And what you will get is you'll get about 150 results saying how Russia is losing. And they're not from reputable sources. And a lot of times they're opinion pieces. One of the favorite opinions that I've seen lately in the news has been, don't worry about what it says on a map. Russia's losing. Yes, Russia's losing. It doesn't matter they're taking territory. It doesn't matter you're being told they're not taking territory. They're losing. They're not winning fast enough. And the very same pundits who will tell you they're not winning fast enough seem to ignore a lot of realities. Yes, the realities that they ignore. And I don't blame them for lying to you folks, because you don't know what they don't want you to know. Because you're occupied with life. You're occupied with going to the grocery store. You're occupied with raising your kids. You're occupied with doing your job. You're occupied with keeping your spouse happy. You're occupied with a lot of important stuff that is important to you, but you don't know the facts of the matter. And one of the facts of the matter is Donbass either needs to be done slowly, or the Russians are going to lose a huge amount of personnel. That's not even debatable, folks. Because there has been this war, a genocidal war, waged in eastern Ukraine for 8 years now. And the Ukrainians, over those 8 years, have dug extensive fortifications. They've poured concrete. In fact, I can show you videos of their bunker complexes that they are out in the middle of nowhere, that they are defending an area. They have electric, poured concrete, big steel doors. They can withstand some serious siege time, folks. And unfortunately, those are not isolated. They are all over. There are these little fortresses of prepared positions all over the Donbass, all over eastern Ukraine. As I've said, the Ukrainians have had 8 years to prepare these positions. And as anyone who's ever studied history and warfare can tell you, prepared positions are a monument to man's inflexibility and his stupidity. Because there is not a fixed fortification in the world that cannot eventually be breached. But what they count on is you not having the patience or the ability to dismantle that position. And unfortunately for the Ukrainians, the Russians have that ability. This has become every Cold Warrior's nightmare. This has become artillery duels. And the artillery duels, stomped on myself, didn't I? The Soviets are masters of massed artillery. They have been since the Second World War. And I can remember being a troop back in the day. There were a lot of things that we did differently than troops do today. Literally, when we would sign on to the net on the radio, we would transmit no more than 3 to 5 seconds. And the reason for that is we understood that electronic warfare equipment of the day could, if you were on the net more than 3 to 5 seconds at one burst, they could triangulate and figure out where you were. And what would happen then? Well, the nightmare scenario is the Soviets would use artillery which it was stressed on us that the Russians had enough that they could simply wipe out a grid square, a 1,000 by 1,000 meter area, and you would be no more. You would cease to exist. You would be turned into atoms and globs of meat scattered around the landscape, and the whole area you were in would be devastated. If there was a forest there, there would be no forest. This was the scenario in the Cold War. Well, that's what's happening now. And it's not on that big of a scale, but the artillery is a very important part of this conflict. And the Ukrainians are crying that they are at a severe disadvantage, which they are. According to what they're reporting, they are only able to launch about 5,000 rounds a day. That's what they're allotted. Meanwhile, the Russians are going between 50 to 60,000 rounds a day. Now, by comparison, the 91 Gulf War, the total allotment of artillery that was expended by the United States is somewhere under 60,000 rounds. So every day the Russians are putting downrange the total equivalent of what we expended in Desert Storm. Now the Ukrainians they're all over the place with the numbers that they're giving you. In fact, it's pretty interesting. The Ukrainians, some sources are actually claiming that the Russians are dumping 500,000 rounds a day. That's not sustainable. That's not realistic. Logistically speaking, ammunition's heavy. I don't know if you've ever had your hands on a real artillery shell, if you've ever had your hands on a real tank shell. These things are heavy. And each individual is heavy. So it expends a lot of logistical support to get rounds moved places. And the Ukrainians are running out. They're running out of the rounds for their older Soviet ordnance. I mean, their guns, their hardware. They're running out. The fact of the matter is, NATO is not making it any easier for Ukraine. In fact, we're making it harder. Because instead of supplying ammunition that we should have been buying up, Soviet vintage or Soviet style munitions. And there are munitions plants that could supply these things in Bulgaria, Czech Republic, and other former Warsaw Pact countries. In fact, a lot of the grenade rounds for the AGS-17 grenade launcher that both sides are using, a lot of the rounds that are showing up in Ukraine that are being captured by the Russians are Bulgarian manufactured. You can tell by the markings. The interesting thing is the Russians don't mind firing this ammunition back at them. So every time they're catching a stockpile of Bulgarian or Czech-made ammunition for the AGS-17, they're using it. Same with their howitzers, same with the tanks, same with all that. And if the Ukrainians were actually capturing and taking all this shit that they supposedly are, then they really wouldn't have a supply issue now, would they? I think you folks need to start being able to reason, and reason how you're being lied to. If the Ukrainians were capturing all these tanks, why are they begging for tanks now? They're begging for more tanks from NATO. They want more tanks than the NATO countries of Great Britain and Germany combined have. They want more tanks than those two countries have. They're asking for over 1,000 pieces of artillery. That's more artillery than we currently have in the United States military. And they want it. They got to have it. But the worst thing about it is we don't give them one or two systems. We give them a whole bunch of different systems and then expect them to learn them. We're giving them in-laws. We're giving them AT-4s. We're giving them old M72 laws. We're giving them javelins. We're giving them this. We're giving them that. The problem is we aren't training them on any of this shit. It's going to the battlefield. It's getting carried as some sort of extra stupid piece of equipment that nobody knows how to use. And I posted a few weeks ago, there are reports that they are capturing cell phones from these Ukrainian soldiers, and they're going through their search history. Javelin is beeping. Javelin's got hot. What is wrong with my javelin? How do I fix Javelin. Javelin's not, Javelin customer support sort of shit. And they don't have it. They don't know how to troubleshoot their weapon. And a lot of them carry it and they're afraid to use it. Now, I'll tell you who isn't afraid to use them are the Russians. They're capturing this stuff and they're using it. And, it's really amazing. And this is how it goes. I had a discussion with a gentleman the other day, and he's like, yeah, they're capturing empty tubes. Once you fire that stuff, it's not reloadable. Well, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Most of this stuff is one-shot disposable. And the cases, the carrying cases, yeah, those could be empty. Well, the Russians have gotten tired of that shit. And now when the Russians capture one of these weapons, they're showing the ends. So you can see the end caps are still intact. They're not blown apart from being discharged. Just to prove the fact that they are capturing live weapons. And the same goes with the artillery and everything else. We are sending them all this different shit. They're not getting trained on it. It's also causing a logistical nightmare. Instead of having 2 or 3 types of artillery ammunition, now you've got 30. You've got all this different stuff that they're going to have to keep up with. It's crazy. We are putting them at a disadvantage, and we don't even realize it. And then we say we're sending shit, and then it doesn't get through. It doesn't get through or never get shipped. I remember there was a big deal about the Gray Eagle drones. We're going to send the Gray Eagle drones. It's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be a game changer. And we heard that shit for 2 weeks. Now, the end of the week, what comes out? Well, it's on hold. They're worried that they may fall into the hands of our adversaries. And by adversaries, they mean Russians. But honestly, folks, a lot of our weapons that we're sending to Ukraine are falling into hands of other folks. In fact, there's a lot of information out there about how Javelins and AT-4s and all sorts of other neat gear that we are sending to Ukraine is ending up on the dark web and getting sold to organizations who probably don't have American best interest at heart. In fact, right now, you can buy a Javelin for about $30,000 American, which is a bargain basement deal for a Javelin. I mean, it absolutely is. And I guarantee you, we paid a lot more for those things when we bought them than the Ukrainians and all their little buddies who happen to be Ukrainian mafia, for lack of a better word, organized crime, and the corruption. And it's just not weapons, folks. It's just not weapons. There are videos emerging of food showing up on store shelves to be sold that is humanitarian aid coming out of Poland. Now, one of the big stories that never got much press here is the Romanians quit sending humanitarian aid to the Ukrainian city of Odessa for the same reasons. They were selling the humanitarian aid for a profit. It's amazing, it's incredible, but it's true. And as we see, the narrative's changing even with the leadership of the EU. They're now telling Zelensky, hey, dude, you need to cut this off. You need to stop it. You need to find a way to negotiate and end this shit. And part of the reason for that is because the sanctions are hurting Europe more than they're hurting Russia. And the Russians are working out just fine. Coca-Cola pulled out, right? So what does Coca-Cola do? It sets up a Russian company that at a casual glance has nothing to do with Coca-Cola. And they start producing their own soft drinks called Funky Monkey. Yes, I'm not kidding. Funky Monkey. There's Funky Monkey Cola and there's Funky Monkey Orange, which basically is a Fanta style drink. Same recipe, same taste, different bottle. And that's not the only place this is going on. And there are other companies that simply say, hey, we're not going to play this cancel game. PepsiCo is a great example. PepsiCo, they own Lay's potato chips. They own Pepsi. They're not pulling out of Russia. They're not stupid. They've invested too much money. They don't feel that their brands are going to be hurt by not engaging in this Russian cancel culture. But Dave, the war. Yeah, okay, the war. Have we declared war against Russia? No. Well, until we declare war against Russia, Russia is not my enemy. It might be your enemy. You might love Ukraine. I don't have any great love for Ukraine. I don't have any great love for Russia to a large degree. I respect the Russians. I respect the Ukrainians. But you know what country I do love? This one. And this one doesn't need to be involved in it. You ought to be ashamed of what our politicians are doing. They're engaging in a proxy war. They're training Ukrainians to kill Russians. Why? Because they're too big of pussies to kill Russians themselves. And they know if they want to send our sons and daughters off to fight to kill Russians just because they've got a hard-on for Russia, that a lot of us aren't going to want to play that game. I don't want to play that game. Not interested in it. I don't have a problem with Russia. You know who I do have a problem with? My problem's all set in Washington, D.C. They don't set in Moscow. Vladimir Putin has never raised my taxes. Vladimir Putin has never called me a racist because I don't agree with a president who happens to be a different shading than me. I have never been called a right-wing paramilitary nut by Vladimir Putin. In fact, Vladimir Putin loves his country. I wish we had a president who loved our country. And the worst thing is, people are starting to find out that our country likes to project shit. Putin doesn't bluff. And for all the lies that I hear that Putin's telling, I can point to more lies coming out of Washington. Why is it that it's okay for our politicians to lie? In fact, we just had the recent ambassador to Russia, a former ambassador, say, oh yeah, we knew that the Ukrainians weren't going to do this and weren't going to do that, and we lied. It's our job to lie. Wait a minute. You have a ambassador, representative, who believes that he has to lie. And the Ukrainians have just lied. They've shown us that they can't be trustworthy. Peter Poroshenko, former president of Ukraine, come out and said, hey, we only signed Minsk. We had never, the Minsk agreements, we never really had any intention of following that shit. Well, we simply signed all that so that we could buy time, that we could get what we want later on. So the Ukrainians have shown it isn't Putin that can't be trusted. They can't be trusted. They'll sign a document, tell you anything they want, and then do what they want. And folks, that's the unfortunate honesty about this. That's the unfortunate situation as it exists. You're just going to have to get over that. We lie. Our government has admitted to lying. The Ukrainians lie. They're going to lie. And yet we're going to say Putin can't be trusted? How does that work? Honestly, folks, how does that work? If Vladimir Putin tells you, hey, you need to straighten the hell up, and everybody going on about how, well, Putin should have tried diplomacy. Well, Putin tried diplomacy for months. And everybody from Joe Biden to Zelensky decided that wasn't going to be the case. They weren't going to engage in a diplomatic solution with Vladimir Putin. And what happens very easily when you don't do this is you end up with a conflict. You know, Putin wanted to negotiate. Now, Europe wants Zelensky to negotiate. And the Ukrainians don't want to negotiate. And the reason they don't want to negotiate is almost criminal. They feel that they're in such a weakened position with Russian troops on the ground that they can't negotiate. They feel that they simply don't have a position of power to come from. So they're going to continue to fight until their situation improves. Unfortunately, it's not improving, and it's not going to improve. the Russians in Donbass aren't going anywhere. The Russians in Crimea aren't going anywhere. And the longer this goes on, and the more pain that Russia feels, the more effort that they have to put into, they're just going to take more territory. And more Ukrainians are going to die, and the results are going to be worse for Ukraine instead of better. It's that simple. And I don't claim to be a Russian mind reader, but I will tell you, I understand a lot better how some of these folks think than a lot of other people do. And at some point, they're going to say, fuck it, let's take the whole thing. And at that point, you're going to see a lot of things break loose. And there's this huge rumor that Poland, maybe after certain parts of Western Ukraine, if it becomes a free-for-all for Ukrainian territory. Pushilin, the president of the DPR, just said, hey, the longer this goes on, there may not be a Ukraine left. And it's really, really getting to that point, folks. It's getting to that point where we're going to see a whole lot of bad things happen for Ukraine. And the longer they wait to try to end this, it's going to spin out of their control. And I'm not even going to get into the whole neo-Nazi thing. I mean, that's another thing. Our government is supporting a military that openly allows neo-Nazis. Our government caused this situation from 2014 on, but we're going to ignore it. I will tell you, I love my country, but I am ashamed of my government bigger than shit. I'm ashamed of my government. I'm ashamed of what they've done to this country, and I am ashamed of what they're doing overseas. And, well, you don't love your country. Well, I'll tell you what, put foreign troops on our ground, put foreign troops on our border. I'll show you how much I don't love this country. I'll be first in line to be the old fat man brigade that's willing to go out there and put my ass on the line again. So that's pretty much how that works. Anyhow, folks, I got to go. I'll talk to you later. Bye.